She laughed when she said, "Beat me in chess and I'll marry you." She wasn't laughing 3 moves later. You ever meet someone who doesn't say much, but somehow their silence speaks louder than everyone else's noise? That was Calvin Brooks. Most nights around 10 p.m., when the streets of Columbus, Ohio started to empty, Calvin was just clocking in. The glass towers of Davenport Industries glowed above the city like a monument to power. But inside, it was quiet. Too quiet. Calvin would roll his cart down the polished hallways, the faint squeak of the mop echoing against the marble floors. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was steady. And steady, to him, meant peace. He'd been there for almost 7 years, never late, never complained. He kept his earbuds in most of the night, listening to old blues tracks. Muddy Waters, B.B. King, sometimes even a little Coltrane when he wanted to feel like his younger self again. There was something about those empty offices that comforted him. The stillness, the order. Everyone else had gone home, but Calvin stayed, cleaning up after the people who made the big moves, the ones who signed the deals, made the calls, wore the $1,000 watches. He never envied them. Not really. He'd seen enough of life to know that money doesn't always mean peace. Every so often, he'd pause by the glass conference room where the board held their weekly meetings. He'd look at the long table, the untouched chessboard sitting near the center, its pieces frozen mid-game. That board always caught his eye. Not because of the game, but because of the way it looked. Perfect. Orderly. Every piece in its place. What no one knew, what no one even thought to ask, was that Calvin once dreamed of sitting across from some of the greatest chess players in the country. He wasn't just good, he was a prodigy. Back in the day, before the janitor's uniform, before life hit him harder than a checkmate, he'd played tournaments all over Indiana and Michigan, won some, lost some. But when his mother fell sick, the board went back in its box. He traded bishops and rooks for brooms and rags, and he never looked back. At least, not until that night. That night, something was different. There was music coming from the top floor, laughter, clinking glasses, the kind of sounds you don't usually hear when you're working a night shift. It was the company's quarterly reception, hosted by the CEO herself, Victoria Hale, a woman everyone either feared or wanted to impress. Calvin glanced at his reflection in the elevator doors. He wiped his hands on his work pants and took a slow breath. "Another night," he murmured. But as the elevator lights blinked and the sound of that party grew louder, he didn't know that before the shift was over, his life would change forever. But up on the 20th floor, the woman who ruled Davenport Industries was about to make a move that would expose her biggest blind spot. Victoria Hale didn't like losing. Not at chess, not in business, and definitely not in life. By 37, she'd turned Davenport Industries into one of the fastest growing logistics firms in the Midwest. Her office overlooked downtown Columbus, floor-to-ceiling glass, minimalist decor, and a sense of authority that hit you the moment you stepped inside. To her employees, she was a force of nature, brilliant, commanding, and sharp-tongued. They whispered about her during lunch breaks. Some admired her discipline. Others called her cold. She didn't mind either way. As long as the company kept winning, the opinions of others were just noise. She'd built her empire on strategy. Every decision, every partnership, every hire, all calculated moves. The same way she played chess. A black marble board sat in her office, right beside her desk. She played between meetings, sometimes against herself, sometimes against executives foolish enough to think they could win her favor by challenging her. None ever did. Victoria wasn't cruel exactly, but she enjoyed the game, the slow cornering, the satisfaction of checkmate. It was her reminder that she was always 2 steps ahead. That Friday night, she stood in front of her staff at the company reception, a glass of champagne in hand. The event wasn't just about numbers or profits. It was her way of reminding everyone who ran the show. "Let's toast," she said, her smile polished and controlled, to precision, to power, and to never settling for second-place applause filled the room. Cameras flashed. Victoria's assistant, a nervous young man named Noah Green, leaned toward her. "Ma'am, should I have someone reset your chessboard before your next meeting?" Victoria smirked. "Leave it. It's a reminder for anyone who walks in here that every move matters." She took another sip of champagne and turned toward the massive windows. From 20 floors up, the city lights shimmered like pieces on a giant board. To her, the world was strategy. Everyone playing, most unaware they were even in the game. but she didn't notice the man in the janitor's uniform in the far corner, quietly emptying trash bins and wiping fingerprints off glass tables. Calvin moved unnoticed, invisible, as most janitors are to the people they clean up after. When he glanced toward Victoria, it wasn't envy he felt. It was recognition. He saw something familiar in the way she stared at that chessboard, that quiet obsession, that hunger to win. And for a brief second, he wondered what would happen if someone like her met someone who could truly outthink her. But the party was just beginning, and before the night was over, a single laugh from the quiet janitor would stop the music cold. The elevator doors slid open to the top floor, and Calvin was hit with a wave of perfume, laughter, and jazz music. He blinked. It was like stepping into another world, a world that smelled of success and champagne. Men in tailored suits stood around high tables, holding glasses that probably cost more than his weekly paycheck. Women in sleek dresses sparkled under the dim lights of the rooftop ballroom. It wasn't his place to be noticed here, and that suited him just fine. He kept his head down, pushed his cleaning cart to the side, and got to work. Polishing glass, clearing napkins, replacing trash bags. Routine motions that let him fade into the background. But as he worked, he couldn't help watching. Victoria Hale moved through the crowd like a queen among pawns. Every step, every glance, perfectly measured. Her laughter wasn't careless, it was calculated, charming when needed, sharp when it wasn't. "Victoria, you never stop working," joked Paul Kinsey, the company's head of operations, holding his drink too close to her designer dress. She tilted her head slightly, that familiar half-smile tugging at her lips. "Work doesn't stop when the lights come on, Paul. That's when most people make their mistakes." Paul chuckled awkwardly. "I suppose you'd even find a way to turn chess into a merger strategy." "Chess is a merger strategy," she replied. "Every move tells you who's thinking and who's just reacting." Her words hung in the air for a moment. The surrounding executives laughed politely, though most didn't really understand what she meant. Calvin did. He understood every bit of it. He lingered near the far side of the room, pretending to wipe a table that was already spotless. The way she spoke reminded him of the tournaments he used to play. The mental duels, the thrill of predicting a move before it even happened. Someone wheeled out the glass chessboard from her office. Black and white marble squares gleaming under the chandelier. It became the evening's centerpiece. "Come on, Victoria," one of the guests teased. "Show us that famous brain of yours." She smiled coolly. "Careful what you wish for." Within minutes, she was seated across from one of the company's VPs. A tall man named Aaron Pike, already loosening his tie as if preparing for battle. Calvin stopped mopping. His eyes followed every move. The pawns moved forward, the knights danced, and Victoria's eyes stayed locked on her opponent. She didn't blink once. Within 10 minutes, she had him cornered. Checkmate. The room erupted in cheers. "You see?" Victoria said, raising her glass. "Strategy, discipline. That's all it takes to win anything worth having." She leaned back in her chair, relaxed, enjoying the attention. Someone joked from the crowd. "What's next, Victoria? Gonna marry the first man who beats you?" That's when she laughed. A confident, slightly mocking laugh, and said the words that would set everything in motion. "Beat me in chess and I'll marry you." The crowd roared, glasses clinked. It was just a joke to them, an offhand comment made by a woman who had never been beaten. But not to the man in the corner with the mop. Calvin couldn't help it. He let out the smallest chuckle, and that sound, faint as it was, carried through the room like a spark in a gas line. But Victoria Hale wasn't the kind of woman who ignored laughter when it wasn't directed by her. The laughter died almost instantly. Victoria's sharp eyes swept across the crowd, landing on Calvin, who stood half hidden behind his cleaning cart. The mop handle leaned against his shoulder, and though his mouth was closed now, the faint trace of that smile still lingered. "Something funny, Mr. Janitor?" she asked. The tone wasn't cruel, not yet, but it carried enough authority to pull everyone's attention toward him. Dozens of eyes followed, the laughter replaced by an uneasy curiosity. Calvin straightened up slowly. "No, ma'am," he said quietly. "Didn't mean no disrespect." Her eyebrow arched. "Disrespect?" "I didn't say it was disrespectful. I asked if you found something funny." Calvin hesitated, then replied, "Just thought it was a bold bet, that's all." Victoria tilted her head, amused now. "A bold bet? You sound like a man who plays." He wiped his hands on his uniform. "Used to." A murmur spread through the crowd. Someone whispered, "The janitor plays chess?" Victoria leaned forward, intrigued. "Used to? So what stopped you?" "Life," he said simply. She smirked. "Life stops most people. I prefer to keep moving." She glanced at the board, then back at him. "Tell me, Mr. Brooks, do you think you could beat me?" Calvin met her eyes for the first time that night. "I don't think much about beating people," he said. "I just play the board in front of me." That answer earned a few chuckles from the audience. Victoria crossed her legs and gestured toward the empty seat opposite her. "Then come play the board in front of you." The room went silent. Calvin looked at the table, then at his mop bucket. He didn't move. "I'm working, ma'am. Can't be sitting up here embarrassing folks." Victoria smiled, her voice dripping with confidence. "Oh, I'm not worried about embarrassment." "Are you?" The crowd waited. Phones came out. Someone whispered, "This is going to be good." After a long pause, Calvin sighed and walked toward the table. He took off his gloves, placed them neatly on the edge of the cart, and sat down. His movements were unhurried, deliberate, the same way he had once approached every opening move of a match. Victoria rested her chin on her hand. "We'll make it quick," she said. "I've got another toast to make after this." Calvin gave a small nod. "3 moves," he murmured. "What was that?" she asked. He looked up. "I said it won't take long." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Victoria chuckled. "Confident, aren't we?" Let's see if that confidence survives the opening. No one breathed as the game began. But what started as a playful challenge was about to turn into something none of them would ever forget. Victoria's manicured fingers reached forward and moved her pawn 2 spaces ahead. The classic opening. Her expression was calm, almost smug, as though she were already 10 moves ahead. Calvin's hand hovered over the board for a moment. He studied it carefully, not her. He didn't play fast. He played right. Then, with the quiet precision of someone who'd done this his whole life, he mirrored her move. The crowd leaned closer. Someone whispered, "He's slow. Maybe he's nervous." But Calvin wasn't nervous. He was watching. Not just the pieces, but the woman across from him. The way her eyes darted between the board and his face, searching for a reaction. The slight tension in her fingers when she realized he wasn't rushing. Victoria moved her knight next, quick and confident. She was trying to control the center, a textbook play. She looked up, a glint of challenge in her eyes. "Your turn, Mr. Brooks," she said, her voice smooth, teasing. Calvin looked at her knight, then shifted his pawn to block it. His moves were calm, unbothered, surgical. "You're taking your time," she said. He smiled faintly. "The board isn't going anywhere." That earned a few laughs from the onlookers. The tension softened for a moment until Victoria leaned in, resting her elbow on the table. "You know, they say chess reveals who we really are," she said. "How we think. How we handle pressure," Calvin replied without looking up. "Or how we underestimate people." That line landed like a stone in still water. The crowd went quiet again. Victoria made her 3rd move, aggressive this time, trying to corner his pawn. Her tone turned sharper. "You think I underestimate you, Mr. Brooks?" Calvin finally looked up, meeting her gaze. "You don't see me at all." He reached forward, moved his queen, and said softly, "Check." The word hit like thunder. Victoria froze. She blinked twice, scanning the board. No, it couldn't be. She'd missed something. She moved her bishop instinctively to defend, but it was too late. Calvin's next move came almost instantly. "Checkmate," he said. The room went completely still. No one spoke. Glasses stopped mid-air. Even the music from the speakers seemed to fade. Victoria stared at the board. Her queen was gone, her king trapped, boxed in with nowhere to go. 3 moves. Just 3. "Wait," she whispered, scanning the pieces again. "That's not—" But it was. Calvin leaned back in his chair, his voice calm and respectful. "Good game, ma'am." The quiet stretched on until Paul, the head of operations, broke it with a stunned laugh. He beat her. In 3 moves, phones started recording. Murmurs filled the room. Someone whispered, "The janitor checkmated the CEO." Victoria sat frozen, her polished confidence slipping for the first time anyone could remember. Her hand hovered over the board, then fell to her lap. Calvin stood, slid his gloves back on, and gently pushed his chair in. "If you'll excuse me," he said, "I still got floors to clean." He turned and walked toward the elevator, leaving behind a room full of disbelief, and one woman who suddenly realized she'd just been outplayed by the man she'd never bothered to notice. But the night wasn't done teaching her yet. The real lesson was still waiting, and it would hit harder than any checkmate. The elevator doors closed behind Calvin, and the sound of them sliding shut was the loudest thing in the room. Victoria sat there, unmoving, staring at the chessboard as if it had betrayed her. Around her, the whispers grew louder, cautious at first, then bolder. Did he really beat her that fast? I thought she was unbeatable. 3 moves? That's impossible. No one dared to laugh now, not with the look on her face. Paul tried to lighten the mood. Hey Vic, don't take it so seriously. It's just a game. Her eyes snapped up to him. No, Paul, it's not just a game. She stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. The sound sliced through the silence. Without another word, she walked toward the window, her heels clicking sharply against the marble. Outside, the city stretched out before her, cold, glittering, indifferent. In her mind, the game replayed over and over. 3 moves. 3. She'd studied advanced openings, memorized entire playbooks. Yet that man, a janitor, had seen something she didn't. It wasn't the loss that stung the most. It was what it revealed. Her assistant Noah approached her carefully. "Ms. Hale, are you—" "I'm fine," she interrupted, though her voice sounded nothing like fine. "Call security." "I want to know who that man is." Noah blinked. "Calvin Brooks. Night janitor. Been here for years." She turned slowly. "Years?" "Yes, ma'am." 7, I think." She exhaled, the tension visible in her shoulders. "And not one person ever mentioned he was a chess player?" Noah hesitated. "I don't think anyone knew." She looked back at the board. "Maybe that's the problem," she said quietly. "We don't look long enough to see what people really are." Downstairs, Calvin walked out into the empty lobby. The night air met him with a chill as he stepped outside, the hum of distant traffic filling the space between his thoughts. He didn't smile, didn't celebrate. It wasn't about victory. It was about being seen, if only for a moment. He walked to the bus stop, the same one he used every night. But this time, as he sat down, he felt something shift inside him. Maybe pride, maybe relief. He wasn't sure. Meanwhile, upstairs, Victoria stood alone by the window long after everyone had gone. The party was over. The champagne glasses sat half empty, the chessboard untouched. She replayed Calvin's final words. "I just play the board in front of me." That line wouldn't leave her. But curiosity has a way of replacing pride, and soon, Victoria Hale would go looking for answers she never thought she'd need. The following Monday, Davenport Industries felt different. The tension in the air wasn't spoken. It didn't have to be. Everyone had seen the video. The janitor who beat the CEO in 3 moves. It spread through the office like wildfire. People whispered about it in the elevators, in the cafeteria, in the parking garage. Some laughed, some admired it. Others pretended they didn't care, but everyone was talking. Victoria walked through the halls like usual, head high, expression unreadable, but inside something had shifted. The woman who once believed control meant strength was now haunted by the memory of a quiet man's calm stare and that one humiliating word, checkmate. That afternoon, she called her assistant. "Noah," she said, "I want you to bring me Calvin Brooks." He hesitated. "Ms. Hale, he's working in the West Wing tonight." "Then I'll go to him," she said, standing up. When she stepped off the elevator onto the nearly empty floor, she saw him down the hall. The same uniform, the same cart, moving with the same unhurried rhythm. Calvin looked up when he heard her heels approaching. He stopped mopping, leaned on the handle, and said softly, "Didn't think I'd see you down here." Victoria managed a small smile. "I owe you that much." She stood there for a second, unsure of how to begin. "You embarrassed me," she said plainly, "but that's not why I came." Calvin raised an eyebrow. "Why then?" "I wanted to understand," she said, "how you saw that so fast. How I didn't." He wiped his hands on a rag. "You were playing me. I was playing the board." "Big difference," Victoria chuckled, shaking her head. "You talk like a man who's been thinking about that game." He gave a small shrug. "I don't think about the game. I think about people." She studied him for a moment, then asked, "You ever play professionally?" "Used to," he said. "State level, Indiana, Michigan, won a few, lost a few." "What happened?" "My mom," he said simply, "got sick, needed care. Chess didn't pay bills, but mopping floors did." His voice was calm, matter of fact, but there was weight behind it. Victoria didn't know what to say. For the first time in years, she felt small. Not in a bad way, but in a way that reminded her she didn't know everything. "I misjudged you," she admitted quietly. He smiled faintly. "You didn't misjudge me. You just never looked close enough." For a long moment, they stood there in silence. The CEO and the janitor, the queen and the pawn, both realizing how wrong the game's labels really were. Victoria finally said, "You ever think about teaching chess again?" He laughed softly. "To who?" "Folks up there too busy to learn." She crossed her arms. "What if I'm not?" Calvin looked at her, really looked, and saw something different this time. Humility, curiosity, a kind of quiet respect. "Maybe," he said, "if you're ready to lose a few more times." For the first time in a long while, Victoria Hale laughed. Not the polished, rehearsed kind, but something genuine. But this wasn't just the story of a janitor beating a CEO. It was about what came after. The part where they both learned what real intelligence looks like. Over the next few weeks, something unexpected started happening at Davenport Industries. Every Friday evening, long after most of the staff had gone home, the lights in the break room stayed on. Two figures sat at a small table facing each other over that same marble chessboard, Victoria Hale and Calvin Brooks. No audience, no phones, no champagne, just two people learning from one another. Sometimes she'd win, sometimes she wouldn't. But what mattered wasn't who said checkmate. It was the quiet conversations that filled the space between the moves. Victoria started asking questions she'd never asked before. "What do you see when you look at the board?" Calvin would answer, "Patterns, opportunities, the mistakes people make when they think they've already won." That line stuck with her, because for years she'd built her success on the idea that strength meant never losing. But Calvin taught her something she'd never read in a business book, that real strength comes from not needing to prove it. Over time, Victoria began treating people differently. She started greeting the night staff by name. She walked the floors more often, not to inspect, but to listen, to see. And Calvin, he didn't change much, except now, when he mopped those same hallways, people looked up. They saw him. They spoke to him, respectfully. He didn't chase recognition, but he didn't hide from it either. Sometimes, late at night, he'd smile at that old chessboard in the CEO's office and whisper, "3 moves." Who would have thought? Their story spread far beyond the company walls, not because of the game, but because of what it represented. The reminder that brilliance doesn't wear a title and wisdom doesn't care about status. At her next company-wide address, Victoria stood before hundreds of employees and said something that no one expected. A company is like a chessboard. The CEO might be the queen, but the game doesn't work without every other piece moving with purpose. The janitor, the driver, the intern, they all matter. Remember that before you call someone less than you. Applause filled the room, but Calvin wasn't there to hear it. He was downstairs, polishing the floor, smiling quietly to himself. Because for him, it was never about the spotlight. It was about the lesson. And maybe that's the point. In a world obsessed with winning, sometimes the most powerful move is just seeing people for who they are, before they ever make their move. If you're watching this right now, remember this. The next time you pass by someone who seems invisible, the janitor, the cashier, the bus driver, look twice. You might be standing next to someone brilliant, someone who gave up their dreams to make life work, someone whose story could change yours, if you just stopped long enough to listen. Because talent has no uniform, and respect costs nothing. So ask yourself, are you playing the board or just playing people?